visiting Wilkes County on business or pleasure? Stay in Wilkesboro at the Holiday Inn Express, Hampton Inn, or Red Roof Inn and Suites. Enjoy Southern hospitality, cozy rooms, and a complimentary breakfast. Explore the mountains and then relax with us. You've earned it. Closed captions for this episode of Life in Wilkes is brought to you by Deal Insurance Agency in Wilkesboro, an award-winning, experienced, family-owned and operated agency with service and coverage that goes above and beyond expectations.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning, Carl.
Wow, my goodness. Seems like we've known each other forever, but it hasn't been forever. It's just time kind of moves by pretty quickly, doesn't it? Seems like a long time, and yet it seems like only yesterday.
Yes, I've earned every one of these.
Tell people who you are. You're both with the Wilkes County Library System, and you're both well known. So, Susan, you start first, and then work your way to the left to your partner in literacy.
Right. My name's Suzanne Moore. I'm the Wilkes County Librarian. I've been here since 2021.
2021, okay.
Yeah, and I'm MaraLynn Tugman. I'm native Wilkes County. I lived away, boomeranged back, and I've been a librarian here for 11 years.
Wow.
And I do adult services projects and try to help people that come in the door.
So adult services, talk about the extent of that, because now that you said that, I mean, she just said the library, okay, but now you said adult services. What does that mean?
Well, we have departments like most different organizations do, and we just divide up. I'm not the kid person. I'm the grown-up person.
Okay.
And then we have circulation, and then we have technical services.
Okay.
But this person right here is the most wonderfulest county librarian that anybody's ever had.
Did you just say wonderfulest?
I make up words.
Oh, well, I didn't know. I would expect you to tell me the right way to do it. So that could be, you said it, even for a made-up word, you said it as best it could be said. Is that right?
Ever since Harry Potter, and it is Harry Potter month,
right? Okay.
J.K. Rowling made up all those wonderful new terms, and the kids use them all the time. So
wonderfulist.
So made-up words are allowed.
Right. Especially in Harry Potter world, right? That's great. Okay. A little fun there. So let's talk about why we're gathering together today, because this is all about veterans. And Susan, you have been telling me about the Veterans book. I have both copies. I think they're really well done. But as we go into Veterans Day celebration, and which I don't know that we don't celebrate our veterans all the time, but we have a moment in time in November that we really concentrate and focus on our veterans. So tell us about the project kind of at a high level, and then let's drill down into what it's now meant to not only get one book published, but now two. Because I'm using as a reference point, as I'm interviewing veterans in the region, I'm able to do some research and read these, not just short pieces, but some of them are multiple pages. Let's talk about it first, and Susan, you lead, and then you jump in as appropriate.
Well, the idea for preserving the stories began when I was in Ashe County, working in the library over there in West Jefferson. And we started that as a community engagement project to involve our youth. We worked with students in the History Appalachian Studies class and in the ROTC class to help them come in and get service learning hours to interview veterans and preserve stories. And I did a few volumes in Ashe County, and then I came here in 2021 and started the project here.
So let me ask, was the program started there, or was something going on?
We based the idea off of our National Library of Congress. They have a National Veterans History Project. So we went to their website to learn about how to do the interviews and got some sample interview questions and some forms to document and keep records. And then we just started putting them online. We have a digital archive on our website that is a companion. Well, the books are a companion to the archive. Okay. The archive contains so much information on everybody. The books have a snippet or a part of the story. And it's just been amazing. We learned so much. I've learned so much over the last several years about different wars and service branches and all the experiences of the military. One year when I did it in Ashe County, we got grant funding to help us publish, right?
Okay.
But one year the grant, it was 2020, the year before I moved over here, and with the anniversary of the women's movement or women's right to vote and all of that, the grant wanted to highlight women who made a difference. So that was the year, and also the pandemic year, when we recruited female stories. And we have a lot of male stories in that volume, but they're told from the women's perspective, from the mothers, the wives, the sisters, the aunts.
Wow, that's interesting.
And we also highlighted some female veterans. Now, there are a few female veteran stories out there. MaraLynn's got a great one to share from our first volume here in Wilkesboro.
So all of what you were just talking about with the stories being told from the female perspective, so that was in Ashe County.
It was, and it doesn't stop. I mean, we can continue to highlight those stories, but that one year we had to come up with some way to get the funding.
Right.
And we actually put Rosie the Riveter on the cover of that book.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So, like on the covers of our books, they're so pretty. We have the vintage war posters, and our publishers help us pick something out every year to make them unique. So it's a great collectible. The stories that we preserve online and then had published are distributed to our veterans that participate as a keepsake, so they can share them with their family and friends. They get several complimentary copies.
Sure.
Then we also sell them to help raise money to continue to sustain the next publishing project. The publishing is an expense, but we've been very lucky with grant funding and community donors. Our two towns here in Wilkes County, North Wilkesboro and Wilkesboro, contribute to publishing.
So once you moved into Wilkes, into your position here, then you met MaraLynn, of course. She was on staff. And how long did it take you from the time you showed up till you started talking about the Veterans Project with MaraLynn? And she's like, hey, let's this is great.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
It was something like that. It was,
really?
Yeah. The project had preceded her, because we had Ashe County's copies of these volumes in our library already.
Okay.
So that made it was a no-brainer.
So
but one thing that surprised me, Carl, because I would have never, and I've told everybody this, I would have never thought that veterans were underserved in any way. Boy, was I wrong, because they are.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because that's an interesting idea. So, first of all, the book, the project, you knew about it before Susan showed up. So when she's here, of course, you're already like, I know one thing we can do, right? Or or when you mentioned it, she's like, yes, let's do that. But this idea of discovering about veterans being underserved, that's an interesting idea, because I think it's what you said about you just didn't know that, or you hadn't thought about that.
Well, I thought it was here in Wilkes, and particularly North Carolina, I think, we have a huge veteran population, maybe more so than a lot of other states. But the thing about it is, it's a continuum that's not ending, because we'll always have a military branch. And I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran. Are you too? Your dad was?
My granddad. He served in World War II.
So when I was a kid, the 98th Bomber Group newsletter would come to the house. Daddy wouldn't say a word, but I could read what his friends were saying. And one year we took a trip all the way to California and back, and we stayed with his friends, his connections. And they had kids my age. So I've learned more through the veterans I'm meeting now than I even learned through my own family. So it's interesting, because they've served in lots. There's so many numerous ways that you can serve.
Sure.
One of our veterans whose story's in the book, he came along after Vietnam, but he got to go live in Korea. He visited Japan, and he served his country for 4 years, and then went to Appalachian after that. Then you go back and you find these really interesting stories. We've got a library patron, and she's well known in the community. If I'll go ahead and drop her name, Barbara Pendry.
Okay.
And Barbara is married to Larry, but Barbara's parents are the Harrisons, and they grew up. Her mother grew up here. Her father grew up in Ashe County. They got together while World War II was going on. They knew each other, but he was in the National Guard, and he went first. He went Fort Jackson and over. And I think I'm right. I might be saying a few facts a little wrong. But Barbara's mother lived, had 2 daughters, and then passed away. And then the daughters found out that their mother was a code breaker. And so that came out from someone who saw her obituary, who served with her in the Navy in World War II in an old college campus outside of Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And they translated mostly Japanese codes.
It's interesting when you talk about the code breakers, because their activity was definitely covert. I mean, that was something that you just didn't, that's not something that you talk to the neighbors about.
Yeah, keeping that secret from her children all those years. That was a surprise.
And one of her roommates is the one who told them about her, and she didn't know what she worked on. Those women didn't talk to each other, even though they lived in the same room.
Right.
And anyway, just stories like that come out, they really need to be preserved. And we're trying to do that with a local angle on it, so that it doesn't get lost in all the noise of worldwide service.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's one of those categories that we certainly have a lot of people who are active in military now, but it's still a small percentage when we look at the general populace.
Yeah.
We had an interview recently and we were talking about that very topic of only having 3% who are either active or even have family members. So the rest of the population is not. They don't get those letters in the mail to where someone in the family is keeping up with what's going on with their particular branch or people in service. They don't have that access, right? So that's probably a part of it. And then the other side is it's history. A lot of what you're doing now, this is history work. While many of these people are still alive, not all of them are. Families are telling their stories, right?
And the thing about it, we wanted to introduce those stories to the younger generations. They had no idea about the sacrifices that were made for our freedom. So,
how's that been going? What has been the response?
I'm going to tell you.
Tell them about our get-together last fall.
Last fall?
With the ROTC.
Oh, that was really fun.
Tell them
we rode the ROTC.
SOS. Do you know what SOS is?
I do.
Okay.
Right. It's the same old stuff. They eat it all the time. We had the veterans at the VFW to cook an SOS brunch. And we brought the ROTC students over to meet them and learn about our project so they could become involved with helping us. And that was just so cool. They interacted and got to talk to them, and they loved the meal. I mean, they ate it all. There was running out of food, so they started cooking scrambled eggs to make up. But that's just one example.
Yeah.
I wanted to share, one of our teen volunteers. He was actually working on the yearbook committee, so he is very into photography. And a lot of what we do is we scan the photos and we upload them in the archive and get them ready for publishing. So he was a big help with that. His name was Kurt Hendricks.
Yeah.
And Kurt, and he's recently graduated. But at the time, we go to the coffee call that happens at the VFW every month on the second Tuesday morning to promote the work. And
that's something that anybody can show up
anybody
for, right?
can come. It's an opportunity to meet the veterans and visit with them. But we started going there when we started this project here. And Kurt came along, and with his photography and took photos of the events and met some of the veterans. And he got to meet Ward Eller.
Right.
And Ward is in our first volume.
There was some mutual... He was amazing.
He was so impressed because Ward's telling his story about serving in Korea, and when he enlisted or was in the service, and Kurt's like, "You're my age." When you went in there, you were like close to my age, and he could have never imagined how. There's actually somewhere, a picture of the two of them, and it's just really cool to see them talking to each other. Yes,
there they are.
Yeah, so we put the books that we publish in our school libraries so the kids can borrow and check them out. We have them in our county libraries, of course, and the college campus libraries. We disperse them around the community at various assisted living facilities. So if anybody's listening today and has a place to share a copy and doesn't have a copy yet, let us know and we'll get you one. But they've become so popular to keep the stories alive.
So it's working.
It's working. I mean, we never have an end to stories. We're still putting the final touches on Volume 3. The stories in our volume, we usually have about 30 individual stories, but we also include some community event type of stories as well, where we walked with Mission 22 a couple times.
That's an underservice that needs more talk.
Talk about Mission 22.
Okay, so Mission 22, and I'm not sure who founded it, but we have the book.
Well, we have a chapter.
It got on your radar first, and then we have a chapter with Heather.
Okay, we'll talk about the project. What is it?
It's, tell her what the 22 stands for.
Well, there's 22 veterans that die by suicide every day. And that's a grim statistic. So Mission 22 is to raise awareness and help with fundraising to offer services for mental health and things, that veterans need.
How is that going when you share that message within the community? Because that's a difficult conversation, but it has become more open in conversation.
Well, at our most recent Gold Star banquet here at the VFW, I attended that. MaraLynn and I both are auxiliary members of the VFW since we have family members that served. And the entertainer of the evening was giving a tribute to that cause. And when a veteran might come to the point of mental breakdown or the struggles that they've endured and the traumas they've lived through seem to haunt over time, it's like he said something that just struck me. It's like a 7,000-mile bullet coming across the
ocean and the continents and everything.
It's like that.
It's like it might have happened 20
they're
years
dying
ago.
in service,
Right.
even though they didn't die in the battle zone. They're still dying in service,
Right.
Even though they're veterans, not necessarily active military.
So it's that different perspective that you would only have if you had been a veteran, if
Right.
you served.
And then for Mission 22, the emphasis on that number is there's all kinds of little marathons or fundraiser ideas where you can do 22-mile walk or 20.
We did a 2.2.
But we did 2.2. We put a little dot in the middle because 22 miles was a long ways.
Well, you started, right?
But we got we
started.
got involved with that effort. So that's one of our stories. We have a lot of community stories as well. But there is a highlight of individuals and the things that they've lived through, and sometimes it is family members. And although it is a Wilkes County project, all the stories aren't natives of our county. Some are transplant stories. They've lived other places and moved here and live here now. Sometimes their family members share stories of lost loved ones and historical events. Far back as this year in Volume 3, we have a Revolutionary War story.
Interesting.
And we also focus on the DAR and the Confederate Veterans Group in our county. They provide some support to publish every year as well. So it's just a historical collection of all sorts of different things. And like Barbara and what's Mr. Harrison's name? Ben and Barbara Harrison, the two that met during World War II. They're an amazing story on both parts.
Are they still here?
They're deceased.
No.
They're Barbara's parents, Barbara Penry's parents.
Okay.
So that was one of the big stories that MaraLynn recorded.
Mother codebreaker was Iris. Father, National Guardsman. Okay, so what happened to Ben?
Yeah,
he's in Italy, and he's sweeping for mines, and one gets him. He loses a foot. He ends up back at Walter Reed. After some time, he has to go up. I'm not sure how he got back home. But when he got back home, he was at Walter Reed, and somebody in a wheelchair was coming over to him after he was first waking up his first day there. And the guy in the wheelchair says, "What you in for?" And he says, "Well," and he kind of threw the sheet over, and that man says, "Oh, that's just a scratch," you know. And
Right.
but what happened with him was, he became a widower, and he took a legal pad of paper, and he just started scribbling his memories down. And so, I mean, I would read it to you, but I need my glasses. But all these little stories he just wrote down, and I had the privilege of transcribing them. Barbara trusted me. We made copies, but his stories, he maintained the most wicked sense of humor. And then later he made a living as a photographer, and he had learned his photography skills in the military.
So the two of you have a unique opportunity then. It's a bit of you're having an experience vicariously.
Yes.
Right? And let me ask you this. So some of the pain that we talk about with the 2022 project and just the complications of that time, because I contend that, yes, these are Wilkes people or people that have come here, but this is an American story. So the veteran stories can be from Wilkes County or from Eugene, Oregon, or anywhere, right?
So and my grandfather, who was from Maryland, he could be in one of our books,
Right.
because I live here.
Right.
It's a story.
But
for
it's the
everyone.
idea. It's the idea of our veterans. Every community has that experience, right?
Right.
It's national.
How has it changed your life? Tell me how it's changed your life, MaraLynn. What has this project done for you and to you?
It's revealed a whole different kind of culture. Mm-hmm. You know, it was one I've always appreciated because of Dad, and all my uncles served. And there's some good stories back there too. You know, my aunt and uncle wrote letters back and forth. They had never met, but my uncle's sister said, "You write letters to him, and he'll write you back." And then when he got back home, they met on the street out here in front of the Liberty Theater. The next thing you know, they're married.
Oh my God! So they literally dated.
By letters. Yeah.
And got to know each other.
Well, and then the other thing is that continuum I was kind of talking about. Lots and lots of World War II stories have gotten declassified. And so that's why we know about the Monuments Men, popular movie. We know all these little efforts that have happened that used to be a secret, about the art and about everything else. But now, guess what's number 4 on the bestseller list for fiction? And it's called The Women. And the Vietnam stories are starting to do the same process. It's been just about long enough for those stories to become declassified. And so we're learning. So the number 4 book in America, and has been for weeks, is a Vietnam nurse's story. And it's by Kristen Hanna, and she does her research. She said, I saw an author video on the computer, and she wanted to write that book 30 years ago, and her publisher said, "You don't know enough yet." Yeah. And so I kind of take that to heart, and I say, I didn't know enough yet.
We learn so much from our veterans all the time, and the stories that come through. And like I said, it's a community engagement project, and every story is important. Even those that worked in the wheelhouse and kept the the tanks rolling and the motor house,
Right.
not on the combat line, because everybody did something. And
Are you shocked at some of the things you hear?
definitely, I was like, I can't believe that.
Well, I'm fortunate. One of the stories I get to hear, we have a talking service book club. That's another thing that started at ASH, and we use this book by the Great Books Foundation. That's got 40 different articles in it, and it's all about the transition from military service to home life. And so, like I have a cousin who said, if you want to know what it was like in Vietnam, read Matterhorn. But so Matterhorn for men in combat in Vietnam, the women for the nurses in Vietnam, and then all these articles. So the one we read last month, let's see, that was about
Tobias Wood.
Yeah, and he, go ahead.
Well, he was a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah, and what he was one of those advisors in Vietnam before, like in the late 50s, and so our Talking Service Book Club, here comes someone, he shows up a lot, and most of the time he'll comment, but he doesn't say a whole lot, and that's okay. We just listen to each other, and it's fun. It's a great discussion. I won't say fun, but he said, well, I was an advisor. I had no military credentials. He said, I went over to Vietnam in the military, but with a diplomat's passport. And I said, wow. So we learned that aspect of things.
You were learning about things you didn't even know existed.
There were hundreds
Right.
of those advisors over there. And the story we read was about an advisor who was embedded with the South Vietnamese.
And they're just little short stories, but the veterans that actually, we target our veteran audience, but the group's Talking Service Book Club is open to anybody to attend. Anyone who wants to understand about
How do they do that?
war and cultural boundaries.
how
You
do
just
people-
come to the library every second Friday at 10 a.m. We're in the meeting room. We got coffee, and we have conversation. And again, we got these books through funding through the North Carolina Humanities Council. So we give them out and share them with our veterans so they can take a copy home to read out of.
Yeah, it's a conversation sparker. And then, but it ends up being some life experience sharing too. And some of the ones that come to Talking Service Book Club haven't shared their stories for a book yet.
Do you pick up a few leads for more stories during that process?
Oh, yeah. And one time we talked about an excerpt from The Things They Carried, the Tim O'Brien book. And, that was the first community student read that Appalachian State University had. And that was about 15 years ago, something like that. But one of those, an excerpt from that is in here. And part of that book is a little bit of fantasy, where Tim O'Brien was saying, this is what I was thinking over there. My girlfriend come to visit. Yeah. Things like that. And that sparked this whole thing. On that Talking Service Book Club, I had about, I think, 25 people.
There was a good bunch that day.
Yeah, and it was really fun because people had read the book, and then they wanted to meet people who had lived it. So that was a connection that got made.
So having that combination then of opportunities for people in the community to not only hear stories that are based off reality, and a side of reality that we don't all know about, and then actually meeting some of the people who were living that. That's a special moment, right?
Yeah.
It was an eye-opener for me when I first started this project and talking to veterans one-on-one, and I didn't even realize half the things that happened overseas and in the war times, different war periods, not just Vietnam. And
has your life been changed?
Yeah, definitely. I have a son who's a veteran. He served in Afghanistan, and we kind of bonded. So, the year when we did the Rosie the Riveter cover, I told the mother's perspective, and he hadn't talked about his service time too much, and I encouraged him to share some things with me. So we have these little guidelines from the Library of Congress with sample interview questions. Well, I know about him and his growing up days, but having him to reflect on what his service years were like with me, we just got a stronger connection between us.
Was that healthy for both of you?
It was, and that's the healing process. With the conversations, it helps, break up barrier. That's what Mission 22 is about, trying to understand and give veterans the chance to know they're not alone in their situations and where they've been and what they've experienced. So I think, but I was back to that first veteran in my office telling me about losing a friend in battle. He said, I never told anybody about what happened before. And it feels like such a relief to have somebody listen and understand and put that down as a memory. It's kind of like, it's always a memory, but now it's kind of a chapter in his life where he's been able to talk about it.
So really there was a therapeutic value to that.
There
right?
is. And that's what standing down from warrior to civilian's all about. That veteran is now passed on over the last few years. He left us, but his story, it was just amazing. He had a letter that he had written to his mother when he was flying above the battle zone of Vietnam. He was on the clouds, the battle below. He said, I feel like I can touch the hand of God. And he was talking about all the different things that, why he was willing to live and die for his country over there. And then at the end, with a bit of humor, P.S. Could I use a beer? So they read that letter to the memorial service, and it's just really heartwarming, and it's like I said, a keepsake. The families now have those stories recorded. They're very excited to have the pictures and the stories put together and to share with their loved ones, and it's
become a keepsake for everyone else too, right?
That's right, and just so the youth, the younger generations know and understand, because it's not like we're experiencing a draft today, and hopefully we won't have trauma on a large scale like that in the future, but knowing. And war is certainly a part of the world. It is.
And understanding those experiences, not only on our side, but to be someone in service anywhere in the world, they're going to have some of the similar feelings and emotions, right?
And we definitely would like to encourage anyone and everyone that would like to be involved with this project to come by and visit us at the library. We are always looking for help.
Yeah, great. Yeah. All right. Ladies, I knew this would go quickly because it's such an interesting topic, and both of you have invested a piece of your life, and it sounds like it's been an enriching process. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Carl.
Thank you for spending time with us on Life in Wilkes. We value you as a viewer and appreciate when you share the show with your friends and family. Be sure to bookmark our channel and join us again on the next episode of Life in Wilkes.